If you can pick three major things that are really important in your life and you know what to say yes to, then you will always know what to say no to.
I'm very excited for our conversation today. I love
So
your
am
sign
I.
in the back there.
As am I. Let me get my little fancy thing showing up.
Good. I love it. I was actually just reading into your story a little bit. I love how much you embrace all parts of that, not just the good, but right, really trying to figure out how to use everything to your advantage. So kudos to you for that mindset. That's amazing to have and to go out and share. So I love how you do that.
I appreciate that. My philosophy has been that when you go through something terrible, if you don't do something with that, then it's just pain that sits with you.
Mm,
And if you can go out and you can make the world a little bit better, even with one person by sharing that story, that's, I don't want to say that was the purpose of that, but it gives it purpose other than
yeah.
just being pain. So
Yeah, it's a very true point. I think there's a lot of people who maybe don't have that example to follow, where they just kind of sit in the pain because they don't know what to do with
what to
it, and
do with it? Yeah,
yeah, it becomes this burden that they carry around.
yeah. And I mean, it's a process like everything. And I think that's important to let people realize that too. None of this stuff happens overnight. The sucker punch usually does.
Yeah,
That's the thing that usually, knocks you off your feet. But the thing people are always hoping for is that big solution. And you don't get the big solution. The solution comes in small incremental steps. So
right.
anyway, can you hear my talking points? Because this,
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of the best part. That's why I love these conversations. Is it's not really just talking points. I'm not going to sit here and ask you a
right.
bunch of prefab questions and have you kind of repeat your talk. It's more about like, hey, let's find some people who've lived some life and done some
Yeah.
things, right? And I understand even for you, this is not just a great story you read one time and decided to make your career out of just going and sharing the story. This is
Yeah.
deeply personal for you, right?
Well, I mean, absolutely. It doesn't get much worse than on Mother's Day finding out your kid's a heroin addict. And that's what happened to me in 2010. That's, he had a reaction to something that he took. We were at my mother's house. We can share this on the show too. By the way, no holds barred.
Yeah, we're officially recording, by the way.
Oh, I didn't even
Yeah,
realize we're officially recording. Okay,
yeah.
so here we are.
It's that casual.
Um,
Let's jump in.
Okay, so here we are. So what happened to me was that on Mother's Day of 2010, we were at my mom's house with the kids and my brother's family. I have a couple of siblings, but my brother happened to be there. And I had left the room, and I heard a commotion coming from the room that I had just left. So I ran back in to see my son shaking uncontrollably on the sofa, and I mean, I knew he wasn't in a good place. Like this is also this is the other thing that people who get hit with things do. They make friends with distraction and denial.
Mm,
You see the train coming, but you're like, this is going on and it's not going to really hit me. But so I saw things coming and tried to deal with them in the moment, but I wasn't allowing myself to see a bigger picture at the times it was presented. Plus, the fact that drug addicts are highly manipulative and are very, very good at distracting you when they know you're just about to clamp down on them. So, anyway, getting back to that story, we ended up calling the paramedics who just kept asking him, "What did you take?" And I'm thinking, the kid's having a seizure. And of course, he wasn't answering them until he got into the ambulance, at which point he told them that he had overdosed on a medication that he had taken, stolen from someone, from his grandmother, I think it was, that was very high in acetaminophen because he couldn't get to the heroin that day. So when we finally got to the hospital, the doctors told us that if they couldn't reverse the effects of that he would need a liver transplant if he lived. I'm like, this is not the macaroni picture frame that I was expecting,
yeah,
on Mother's Day. So, and of course, I'm I'm making light of it, and I think people who have really serious problems, you find dark humor because in some ways you kind of have to lighten the mood. Anyway, very long story short, we ended up getting him into rehab, much against his protestations, but that was the line. you go there or I'll get you your stuff and you can go to one of your friends' houses. And that started the journey officially. But things had been happening before that. So, you know, you resilience is resilience makes you be present. I know that's one of the things that you focus on is being
Yeah.
present. And when you need resilience, it's because something's going on and you need to be present. So that was kind of the culmination of a lot of things for me that started me on a different path.
Mm. So take me back a little bit to you before that period, right? Because there's obviously the build up, the tipping point, and then right the rest of the journey after that. So going up until that point, right? You said that there were some signs, you kind of noticed it, but like, what was your relationship like with him? Were you maybe not as present, or was there some other thing that was going on for you personally in that moment that maybe shaped that story a little bit for you?
Well, I know you're younger than I am, but if you've ever seen or heard of the Brady Bunch, I was Marsha Brady.
Yeah.
I never did anything wrong. I had no experience with that. My father was a heavy smoker of cigarettes until he ended up quitting one day. So I never even tried those because if you've ever been in a closed car with somebody smoking, it's not, you don't like that. So I never tried that. And I never did anything. So, and I was with my kids constantly. Like I was a youth minister at my church, so I was on site. I was a sub at their school. I mean, I always say to people, "Do I look like the mother of a drug addict?" And the answer is no, because nobody does. It could be anybody. It could just be anybody. So you also, when you spend time raising your kids and teaching them right from wrong, and something this dramatic comes into your life, there's this constant thing in your head going, they're not that stupid. He wouldn't do that. He knows the dangers. And then there's the other thing that goes, well, you know, kids experiment a little bit. And it was started with drinking, which was the thing that everybody goes, well, you know, young kids drink a little bit. And um, it was, again, it was a lot of distraction and denial because every time I would say to him, look, this has got to stop. And I didn't know that there were drugs involved at the time. It was drinking. He pulls back and I think, okay. And then you have a period of calm, which is typically how it goes with people in that situation, because they know you're at your breaking point and they don't want it to change. So they'll adjust their behavior a little bit so that you back off. So we were in a cycle. And then the
Mm.
tipping point for the cycle was the pills, the overdose.
Right. So then going back to that, what I'm hearing you say there is not like you weren't a present mom, wasn't that you were not involved, but unfortunately, you can't be there literally all the time to make decisions for them. They need to be able to make their own decisions. Um, and the thing that I'm really hearing you say there is we are going to be put into certain situations in life that may not necessarily be our fault, but ultimately we bear some responsibility for. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
I think so. But I also don't want to put blame on people because nobody intentionally, I mean, obviously, if you good heart, good soul, want the right thing for your family, nobody intentionally walks into this with blinders on. Nobody
Right.
does. But like I said, there's an expectation, and we teach to our kids when they're young. You know, if you do the right thing, everything will be fine. Everything will work out. Well, it doesn't always. It just doesn't. And I guess what I would say is it could happen to you. Anything like this could happen to you. Don't waste time looking for the why in that present moment. Don't waste time blaming yourself for something that is. Deal with what is. Because that blame game, I mean, yes, if you, in retrospect, everybody needs to look at what led up to things. But in that moment, I wrote a book called The 15-Minute Master, and that's where I got this from. In that moment, you go through the next 15 minutes at a time. What do you need to do and what can you do? And those are very often two different things, and what you want to do, and do that. But allow yourself the grace to be human in that moment. Recognize that you probably did your best, but you can't control everything. So figure out what you can control and act on that in that moment.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people default to blame as the first step, either to blame somebody else,
Mhm.
to say, hey, tag, you're it. It's not my fault. I'm good. It's your problem, right?
Right.
You're the one to blame. That somehow makes me feel better because I put it on you. Or they do the opposite and blame themselves and say, I'm the worst. It's all my fault. And then they build this pity party around, everything that they thought they did wrong. And I love how you say there, what difference does it really make? Because deciding who to blame doesn't change anything, right? It's not like if I say, hey, it's your fault or my fault, the milk is still on the floor. One of us has to clean it up. So let's
Exactly.
stop arguing with each other and figure out which one of us is going to grab the paper towels and which one's going to go clean it up.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and it's a hard thing to, I think, get over if you're not used to that type of conversation. Especially a lot of people, maybe they were raised in a situation who, their parent might have said, when you spill the milk on the floor, the first thing is to yell and scream and, hey, what's wrong with you? Man, I didn't do it on purpose. It wasn't my plan. But like, do you want to blame me or you want to go grab the paper towels? And I say that kind of jokingly because for the first half of raising our kids, I was that guy. I would instantly overreact because that's what I had when I was a kid. It was the,
Yeah.
hey, what's wrong with you? Why did you do that? Obviously, I didn't do it on purpose. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
last night,
I did it to tick you off and make you yell at me. So
yeah,
when you think about it that way, yeah, you're right. They didn't do it on purpose. So
yeah. But last night I was actually in the kitchen with my daughter, and she was goofing around in the kitchen and knocked over a whole cup of milk right across the table, across her homework, across her books. And I thought in that moment, like I looked at her and she looked at me, and she bolted across the kitchen to go grab the paper towels, and I started moving stuff on the table, and then we just started laughing about how there's milk dripping off everything. And it was like a interesting moment to start to think about the contrast between now and a couple of years ago, what that experience would have been like. And I just think it's an interesting point. Obviously, it's milk. It's very different than kind of what you went through. It's a very much more serious circumstance. But I think the point remains that there's a certain responsibility for us in how we show up and deal with the people around us, where it's not, hey, I'm going to blame you. It's all your fault. You're the worst. That's not helping anybody. It's not serving anyone. It's not helping them grow. I would tend to imagine your son did not want to be in that position. Right? That wasn't his goal. That wasn't his dream. When you ask him when he's an 8-year-old kid, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? That probably wasn't his
heroin
answer,
addict
right?
wasn't one of the choices. Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah,
And nobody picks that. I mean, nobody picks that. So you do have to, again, going back to this idea of giving us all grace to be human. We're going to make mistakes. Like every day we're going to make mistakes. So to your point about skip the blame game, it serves no purpose. It really
yeah,
doesn't. I mean, now that doesn't mean that I don't believe reflection is valuable, because it is. Because just as you just said, when you look at your experiences with your behaviors and you go, like I could have handled that better, then yes. But to say, well, who made him a heroin addict? What? Like that? Nobody did that. That was a combination and a culmination of experiences, choices, and things that I had no control over. Now, again, looking back, I think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done this or that. But there's not a parent in the world who
yeah.
wouldn't have that experience if you go through your entire life. So those things are not helpful. What is helpful is in the next 15 minutes to make something better. What can you do? What should you do? And what are you going to do? Like, ask yourself those three questions, and an emphasis on can, should, and going to, because sometimes what you want to do is certainly not what you should do.
Right.
Um, you have to be thoughtful about it, but that doesn't mean beat yourself up over what came before. Be
Yeah.
thoughtful about what you're going to do next in those circumstances.
Is there a thought about what you can't do, like in terms
Yeah,
of
there's
I can't change your mind, I can't change your thoughts, so it frees you of that responsibility of things you can't control.
yeah. So when I talk about when I say to people about what can you do, first of all, you start with your values. You start with your what's really really important here. And when something happens with one of your kids and it's that dramatic, that becomes crystal clear. Like everything else kind of goes by the wayside and you realize what's really really important. So when you're making those decisions about what can you do, figure out what is important. And then you check your perception of the whole thing, because sometimes what we think we're seeing is not what we're seeing. Just like me with him prior, thinking, well, he's growing up, he's a young guy, and not letting distraction and denial fuzzy up the picture. Tell
Right.
yourself the truth, not alternate facts, the facts. So start with your values, tell yourself the truth, and then control the controllables. When you say what can you do, what are you actually able to accomplish here? And so, and like that could be different too. Like sometimes, and again, depending on people's circumstances, sometimes you do something active, recognizing that the action will in itself will be imperfect because nothing you do is going to fix the situation right away. Sometimes the thing to do is just sit still and do nothing and see if it unravels itself. And sometimes the best thing to do is retreat and take a breath. So, you have to figure out from there which of those things works.
Mm. Yeah, I'm looking right now at the definition of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So the formal definition is the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most beautiful parts about that is the capacity to withstand. It's not necessarily the recovery part, because I think that that part will always come later.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can build the capacity to withstand, you can outlast pretty much any problem ever.
Yeah. So here's the way I look at that too. This is what a lot of people, we've heard so much about resilience since COVID, but what people don't remember is that you are born with this. You are born with resilience. A child falls an average of 17 times an hour when learning to walk. 17 times an hour. And they don't get up and wring their hands or lay on the floor and go, I'm never going to be able to do this. They just get up and they try again. And I think that a big part of that is because at that age, children just naturally realize that failure is a part of learning and a part of growth. They don't name it, they don't think about it, they just do it. But as we get older as adults, we associate failure with shame and embarrassment,
Right.
and that keeps us from trying. And that's when our resilience muscles start to atrophy a little bit. So you have to be willing to recognize, again, I go back to this idea of imperfect action. Resilience means standing up, you take the hit, and you figure out what you're going to do next. And that could be any one of a number of things, but we have it within us. We just have to remember that, and remember that failure is not going to kill us. Embarrassment is not going to kill us. It's all part of learning and growing and just going, well, that happened. Now what?
Right.
And keep it simple.
Yeah. And I think the important part there to expand on that concept is it's not us being afraid of failing, it's us being afraid of other people seeing us fail,
Yeah.
right? Or hearing
Well,
that we fail, or
yeah,
the
but I
opinion
also
of
think
other
a lot
people.
of people, again, it depending on your growing up and all of that. Some parents can be tough and make it seem like a failure is a failure, meaning you're a failure. A failure is just a thing that happens in a moment. It doesn't mean that it defines you. And that's what we have to separate ourselves from, that idea that this failure defines me. One of the things that I say is you have to make a decision. Are you just visiting this challenge, or are you going to live there? So if you frame it in that I'm okay, I'm here temporarily, but this isn't. I'm not going to live here. You don't get a beanbag chair and squish your butt in there and make yourself comfy, because then you're stuck.
Right.
You recognize that this is an experience. This is something that's happening, but it doesn't have to be the end of it unless you make it the end of it. Some people do define themselves by their tragedies and failures and all that, and look at where they are.
Yeah. Do you think there's a part of that that has to do with the importance of understanding how fragile life is as a whole?
Oh,
So, like, when you really take seriously how short a period you truly have, and none of it is guaranteed for you to be here and enjoy this, are you going to waste all that time, right, making yourself comfy in that beanbag chair on this problem? Or if you realize how fragile life really is and you may not even have the rest of today, are you going to waste this moment on that meaningless crap?
yes, and having an experience like going into a hospital with your kid and having the doctor tell you, "Yeah, we hope he won't need a liver transplant if he makes it tomorrow." That brings that point home. And at the end of all of this, even in the midst of pain and challenge, you have a choice to make. Do you want this to be your defining thing that colors every single part of your life? And again, I am not minimizing anyone's pain or tragedy, because there is a lot of that in the world. But what I am saying is, even at its worst, time is going to make that particular experience pass. So at some point, when you are mentally healthy and prepared to make the decision to move forward, do it. Move forward, because you've already seen how quickly things go by. Make the decision to move forward. Doesn't mean that you
Yeah.
forget, doesn't mean that it's not a part of you, but it doesn't have to be the thing that colors your every single movement from that point on.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a beautiful part of that too, is actually it could color it in a good way.
Yes.
Right? I think you have that power that most people don't realize they have to give meaning to the moment, where either it can color everything really dark and abysmal, or you can everything make everything full of color, where it could be exciting. And now you have this thing where you said, hey, I'm going to take this thing that was meant for evil, meant for bad. I'm going to use it for good. And now you're where you are, where now you're speaking on stages, talking to people about this thing that was, hey, maybe it could have been a really dark moment in your life, and could have sent you down a really negative path, but now you used it to go and help other people. So, I think it's realizing that you have power at any given moment in time to write the rest of your story. You have to decide how you want it to be written, right?
Yeah, and that's a beautiful way to put it. There's a point in every novel where this big plot thing happens,
Yeah.
and how do you want the resolution of that to be? And again, that's part of when I'm saying you move forward, you're not leaving that behind. It's a part of you. So what are you going to do with it now? You can either bemoan the fact that this happened and wring your hands for the rest of your life, or you can say, as I said earlier when we were talking, when I didn't know we were even recording, that you take that pain and you make it a force for good. And
Right.
I've spoken not only publicly, but I speak with a lot of individuals who get my number some way or another, and I speak to them on the phone privately. Um, and if I can help one person get through this with a little bit of hope and perspective and awareness and resilience, that's the good that came from my experience.
Yeah. Well, I love how you say if you can help one person, right? Because that, I think, is a really realistic and reasonable expectation. And I think a lot of people don't have that expectation. We think that, hey, we are going to, you know, evolve into this viral sensation that's going to, be doing all this stuff. And we minimize the importance of just being present for that one person, or even if that one person's ourselves, right? We,
Hmm.
we stop thinking that, hey, that's actually really important and really beneficial. And we want to have this big glorified version. And hey, when it doesn't turn out to be that, or I'm going to make an assumption here, there's probably times where you've shared a message that maybe got 3 likes and 2 comments, and that was it. And you feel like, wow, this was a really impactful thing I shared. I was vulnerable, I was transparent, and this is really important for people to understand. That doesn't get the same impact in terms of metrics that most people would compare against, right? Have you had that experience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to detach. This is another thing that I always say. You can't be married to an outcome. You have to do this, and you will find yourself doing it because it's the right thing. And that's the other thing that, when you experience a crisis, the scales are very out of balance in your life. When you put the good out there that came from it, there are going to be times when the good's going to be there all the time because of that message. But there are going to be other times when things are kind of in the balance, but you will find that sharing that message and trying to feed good in the world trickles down into your life. And you will find other, even smaller ways to put positive stuff out there. And I'm going to get really simple here. Open the door for a mom who's trying to push a kid in a stroller into the store. Very simple things can become part of that trickle down effect of trying to put some good back into the world after your challenge. And if that's the only thing that you did that day is open the door for that woman, she remembers that. She
Yeah,
remembers that some kind stranger opened the door. You'll probably never see her again, but that's your little sprinkle of fairy dust in the world that day. And if that's the impact you have, that one more for the good. You lit a candle, and one candle always dispels the darkness. If there's
mm,
one candle lit, it's not dark.
it's very true. When you were saying that, I was getting this visualization of spreading seed.
Hmm.
So just thinking about, you've got a handful of seed and you throw it out there on the dirt, and some of it might land on rocks. Some of it might land on, you know, soil that has not been tilled, soil that's not necessarily ready to receive that yet. And we get this initial feeling like, hey, that might be a waste of time. It landed on rocks. What was the purpose? And then, oh my God, it rains. And now this is the worst. It's raining. I threw the seeds on rocks. Nothing happened. And then I think we forget that, hey, now that rain, which we thought was a bad thing, is going to take that seed and slide it off that rock into this soil that's now moist from the rain. And now, boom, all of a sudden, mission accomplished. Right? So these things which started out by us just doing the one thing, which, sowing the seed, which we went out there, we can control, right? And then instead of it being a negative, it landed on a rock, it rained, all of this stuff happened. All of those things which we thought were for bad turned out to be for good, but only because we did the thing that we were supposed to do and go out there and sow seed, right?
That's exactly right. And if you look to use another analogy, if you look at your life as a tapestry, you're weaving in threads, but there are also other people weaving in threads. And to your parable point there, I'm a big believer in a higher power, and that's a parable about the sower of the seed.
Right.
That idea that we are not in this alone. Every action that we put out into the world there is going to be some kind of a reaction. You might not see it, or you might not see it right away. You're weaving your thread. The other threads are also getting woven. And then at the end, whether you see it or not, and this is where I say you have to detach from the outcome of this. If it's the right thing to do it for that reason. And you may never know what happens from that, but you'll know that you put the right thing out there into the world. And you can know and pray and hope that that does lead to something else. But even if it doesn't, it was something in that moment. And again, that's your candle for the day. And we have to be, we live with the unknown every day. We have to accept that even when we do something really good and we think we should be cheered, yay, look what I did, we might not get that gratification. That's okay. Find something else that feeds your soul at that moment. Put the seed
Yeah.
out there, and then go take a walk, go do a painting, go what, do something that feeds you, but detach from the end game. Do your part, detach from the end game.
Yeah. And I think it's also really important too to not be ashamed to clap for yourself,
Yes.
right?
Woo!
To be proud of you for doing that thing, even if nobody saw it. You did, right? And
I
you
have a
know,
tiara back there on this table. I don't know if you can see it, but
yeah,
I have a tiara back there because it's okay to feel like, look at me, look what I did, even if I'm the only person that sees that.
yeah,
We should celebrate the good, even if we're only celebrating ourselves.
yeah. I think it's a really important part. One of my favorite things that I tell people often is a lot of what I see is people who stare in the mirror and wait for their reflection to smile first.
Oh my
That's a
gosh.
major problem that we have, right? We need to be the ones willing to smile first to see the good, and then the good will come back to us. We can't just stare in the mirror and say, why isn't my reflection smiling at me? This is what we do day to day, right? We have to be the one to say, yeah, put that freaking tiara on and I'm going to rock it because I did this. I'm proud of me, even if nobody else saw it. I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, we have to recognize that we are not always going to be recognized.
Right.
And that's a humbling thought, especially when you've been through a really difficult time and you're trying to put good stuff out there into the world. Um, I can tell you this: I did a speaking engagement a couple of years ago, and people were applaud, blah blah blah, and then they all left the room, except for this one man who, before I even got off the stage, he had his arms on either side of the stairs and he said, "I can't let you go until I tell you about my son." And then he started to cry. That, and he didn't have to tell me anything, but that one moment that he did, that meant more than anybody else that came up to me afterwards. Now, he had the courage to come up and say that to me, but there were other people in that room, I know, because there's not a single person who hasn't had a challenge, who have had challenges, who didn't say anything to me. You have to put the message out there, pray that it lands, pray that the Lord or whoever you believe in or whatever force or whatever, or just, the energy of mankind, put it out there and hope that it does some good. And then you don't waste time thinking about it. You move on to the next opportunity to do some good. Because one of the things that I talk about in being brilliantly resilient, when you detach from the outcome and just allow these things to grow and you operate from a place of service and you operate from your heart, that's when all the good stuff happens.
Right.
Because when we lead with that feeling of your heart is full and you're doing something positive, that energy goes somewhere, whether you see the results of it or not.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of that too is, like we've said, I think a multitude of times at this point is who are you doing it for?
Hmm.
Are you doing it for the round of applause, or are you doing it because it's the right thing to do and you're doing it for you? And right, you're doing it because God blessed you with breath in your lungs and hope in your heart today, right? He woke you up today for a reason. You go out there and pursue that. And if you honor that gift that you were given and go do the thing that you were called to do, yeah, you'll be taken care of. But you're doing it for that reason. You're not doing it because someone's going to like and share it or applaud you or whatever else, that you need. You don't need that fulfillment. Hey, that's great if you get it. It's a bonus. But if you don't, who cares? I didn't do it for that reason.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that shift in, hey, I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. I'm doing this because I felt called to do it. That will give you so much freedom to not even care. Who cares if this doesn't get any engagement? I didn't do it for you anyway. Right? It's so freeing to be in that
Oh,
moment. It's the best, is
that
it
is the
not?
word. That's exactly the word. We have to release ourselves and free ourselves, first of all, from that need for gratification. And that's hard because in this world of social media, you're always looking for those thumbs up buttons. Did I get a lot of thumbs up? We're kind of programmed for that these days. But that idea of the likes and the things like that, that's, I say to myself, that's not my problem. That's not my worry. There are a few more powerful things to say to yourself than "that's not my problem."
Right.
That is very, very freeing. And that release allows you to continue to focus on what's right. And that does come back to you. And for the people who are struggling, that allows you to focus on that next 15 minutes.
Right.
What can I do in the next 15 minutes? Okay, I got through that 15 minutes. what is the next 15 minutes going to bring, and what can I do there? And you leave what happened in the last 15 minutes. Obviously, you look at it, because you implement an action. One of two things is going to happen: something or nothing. So when something happens, you go, okay, well, that happened, now I have a clue for what to do next. And when nothing happens, same thing, you have a clue for what to do next. But you can't spend time over what happened. You do something, you let it go, and piece by piece you shovel yourself out of the crisis. You're not going to get that big moment that the crisis hit you with. That hardly ever, if ever, happens when a big
Right.
crisis happens. It's those incremental steps that move you forward. And if you can do some good with that, either in that present moment, which is often not likely, survival in a crisis is get yourself out of it. But if you can do some good with that further down the road, you've won on so many levels. And honestly, at the end of the day, it just feels good. It just feels good to do the right thing and to maybe put some good out into the world, whether or not somebody patted you on the back. And like you said, I'm going to sit here after this interview and put my tiara on and just play solitaire for a while. I don't know.
Yeah, as well you should. As well you should. But yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think the big part of that is understanding that it's a long game, right? It's
Yes.
the sequence of a lot of small events over time, and it's not even small wins over time; it's small events because there's going to be some losses, but so long as you keep going out there and working at it and being willing to show up, you're going to do the thing that you were called to do. It's just that simple. And over time, you're going to get there. It doesn't matter if it's a year or 10 years or 50 years from now. If you don't give up, you'll get the thing that you were called to get. And it's really just that simple. But, you look around and you see the people who don't have that thing. It's because they quit. Right? It
It's really funny.
oftentimes
I was
takes time
talking
to.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and um she told me this thing that an author had written about. I think it was Elizabeth Gilbert, who talked about you have an idea or you have something in your head and it sits on you because you are capable, because you have the opportunity and you have the tools and all of that to do something with it. But if you don't do something with it, that idea leaves you and it goes to someone else who is the fruitful soil
Right.
where that thing can be. So if I call it the tug, if you are tugged and something is not letting you go, you have to look at that thing because you are being called. I mean, we can put it in any terms that you like. Some people don't like the I call it the woo woo stuff, but that tug is real. And
Yeah.
if you feel that you're being called to something, figure out why, figure out what it is, and then do something about it, even if it starts with one person.
Mm. I agree. And I think to put a finer point on that is also the understanding that just because you are called to do it does not mean that it is guaranteed to be a success in your terms, right? Because, hey, if we look at this and you feel called to do that and it does not work out the way that you expected it to be, right? So let's say someone, you wake up and you feel this calling to start a business or start a podcast, and you go and you chase that calling down, you go do the thing, and it doesn't produce the fruit that you expected it to produce immediately. You might think this calling was BS, it's a failure. But wait, there's more. At a certain point in the future, you come to realize that was actually teaching you a lesson that you needed in that given moment to carry you through to a greater good that was still to come. Right? But we need
And,
to do these things and not worry about, is it a win or a loss? Just continue to chase your heart and chase those callings and show up.
and I think that's the challenge of being present in the moment because if we're present in the moment, we have to disassociate that being present from winning all the time.
Right.
Like to your point, because very often being present in the moment most of the time is, all right, what is this moment teaching me? And it not often, but a lot of times you will get to a certain point further down the road and something will be going on and you'll be like, oh, that's why that happened. But we don't have the benefit of that knowledge in that moment when we're disappointed. So find out what could be of value in that moment. Don't measure it by the world's success or even your definition of success, and file it away and recognize that the experience in and of itself brought you something, even if you don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think the more that you do that, it builds up this sort of pattern in your head that you start to recognize, hey, this is going to be a good thing at some point. And it's very,
Yes.
again, very freeing feeling where you could just be in the moment and just be like, hey, cool. If this works out, awesome. If it doesn't, it's going to at some point. So just go and do the
Hang
thing.
in
At some
there.
point, it's going to work out.
Yeah, hang in there. It's kind of like this, ooh, where's this going to come back and be helpful, and it
Yeah.
will. I think that there are so many experiences in my life that I initially, was either horrified or embarrassed by something, or it was awful. And again, obviously the climactic one was my son's situation. But where I am now, I wouldn't change that place. Now, again, let's qualify. If I could get there without all that other stuff, I would, that would be
Right.
fine too. So I never want to minimize anybody's experiences or challenges or pain. I never want to do that. But the lesson here is no matter how difficult and challenging, we are all part of a huge tapestry. And there are going to be ways when those experiences that you have had will come to serve you, will come to serve those close to you, and very likely will come to serve people that you either may not even know or meet very peripherally in your life. And we have to, um, being in the present, we have to also release our attachment to even the present moment. Be there, but don't attach yourself to it in the sense that it has to become something else. It's
Right.
just that. And then if it does become something else, great. But if it doesn't, there are parts of it that are still feeding where you are going.
Yeah. That thing is still cooking. So just let it
Yeah.
cook. It'll be there at some point. You just got to wait.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Patience
I
is
think,
not my strong suit. So that's a hard one for me. But yeah.
I think I'd love to mention as well, just to clarify, I am not perfect of this, right? I'm not totally, solved of ever having frustrations and worries. So as much as I say yes in the moment when I know that there's a struggle or a problem, I know eventually it'll work out for good. That does not mean in the moment I don't still get frustrated or worried or whatever that is. I want to be super clear. I am not perfect and I am not free of that. The difference there is, having done this for so many years, the feedback loop of being frustrated to knowing it'll work out for good has gotten much shorter.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to make that point super clear because I don't want it to seem like, again, I'm this perfect person who never has frustrations or worries, and make you, the listener, feel like I'm broken or I'm different or I'm never going to be at that point. Okay, it's normal, totally normal, and it always will be there. The feedback loop just gets shorter, and you learn the techniques, and you learn yourself, and you learn the confidence in yourself, and you learn faith over fear, because both of those things, faith and fear, require you to believe in something you can't see. Right. So the more that
Hmm.
you continue to exercise your faith muscle and realize that, hey, this is going to work out for good, the shorter the feedback loop gets, where you understand this situation I'm in right now is temporary. It will work out for good eventually. And if it has not worked out for good yet, again, it's going to get there. Just keep moving forward. Be resilient. Like you said, I think the example you gave of falling down 17 times an hour is a great one. As a kid, you don't say walking is not for me. You just get back up. You don't even really know any better. You just keep doing the thing. Yet at some point we start to worry about, oh, what's, my friend going to say if they see me fall? Will someone share it on social media? Will someone talk behind my back? Who cares? Right? Words sometimes are difficult. When we free ourselves of that worry about other people's opinions, that's when we can continue to show up and be resilient, because that's just the purest form of us. I love that so much.
It is absolutely true. And I say, nobody ever died of embarrassment. It, that's not gonna be the thing that takes you down. Um, Being true to what you believe is the only real way to move from day to day without letting the world overwhelm you. And that's where I go back to that value system. Figure out what really means the most to you. If you can pick three major things that are really important in your life and you know what to say yes to, then you will always know what to say no to. Because
Yeah.
those things, when they're at your center and when they're at your core, it doesn't really matter what anybody else says or thinks or does. If you act on those principles and those things, you will do what is right in that moment. Again, not going to solve the problem. To your point, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. I always say to people, you can learn to be brilliantly resilient, but you're never going to get there. You're never going to arrive at that place, and that's always where you're going to be. Even the most experienced yogis who do yoga, they refer to it as a practice. They never say, I've got yoga. They never, ever, ever say that, because they know that despite the fact that they may have been doing this for decades, that there are going to be days when certain things, the body's not going to cooperate. You're not going to be in the mood. You're not going to have the energy, whatever. So you have to, again, give yourself the grace to be a human. Know that when somebody is paying by check in the checkout line at the grocery store, when I've got to be somewhere and, I'm just like, I mean, is that being brilliantly resilient? Well, maybe not in that moment, but I'm human. That kind of stuff, those things get to you. And as long as you're not barking out in public or whatever, allow yourself the grace to feel the frustrations of life. Just don't live there.
Right. I love that. If you had one thought to leave our visitors with for the rest of the day, what would it be?
You are already resilient, and your brilliance lies within your challenges. Take imperfect action and continue to believe in the goodness and the strength of your own humanity.
I love that. Thank you for being here today, for sharing what you shared, for your vulnerability and transparency. It means a lot to me. And, I do believe that the person listening to this right now has a sense of freedom, a sense of value, a sense of purpose. And I believe that's all due to you showing up here and being you and sharing your authentic self. So I just, again, want to honor you for doing what you did and taking the path you took and using it for good rather than sitting in sorrow and grief and feeling bad for yourself. But now you're here sharing it with other people, and it's a beautiful thing. And I know that lives will be changed because of what you did and what you continue to do. So again, tremendous honor. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. This has been a beautiful and inspiring conversation, even for me. And I would tell people to have these conversations with people, and don't be afraid to talk about these kinds of things, because this is what it's all about. This is what about is communication and sharing our humanity. And I thank you for the privilege of sharing this with your listeners today and with you. Thanks, Jim.
Hey, before you go, can I pray for you real quick? Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for our guest, for this day you've given us, for the hope in our hearts, the breath in our lungs, for just allowing us to be here in this moment and to share this story together. I ask that you continue to provide our guest with the wisdom to keep showing up and seeing life in the most glorious of ways. I ask that you continue to bless the listener of this podcast right now with the wisdom to see that all of the things that are happening for them right now are for good, if they can just allow the timeline to zoom out and understand that at some point it will be used for good, that the mess will turn to a message, the test will turn to a testimony. They just have to stay resilient and hang in there and choose faith over fear, because what is happening right now in this given moment in their lives, whatever stress that they are under, I ask you that you release that stress, that you remove that stress from their shoulders so that they understand they do not have to carry this weight alone, that they have people who are willing to walk with them equally yoked and who are willing to show up beside them and support them and help encourage them, that again, whatever they are going through right now in this moment will be used for good, and that all things point back to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Love you.